Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav, and with me is Anita Anand, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, discuss bilateral, multilateral and regional issues including Afghanistan. Nearly 600 people evacuated from Kabul so far. Government to brief floor leaders of all political parties on situation in Afghanistan on Thursday. China calls upon Pakistan to upgrade its safety measures after suicide bomber attacks motorcade in Gwadar. U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA fully approves Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. BRICS scientists team up to set up network of genomic surveillance and study the overlap of SARS-CoV-2 with tuberculosis. Medium-term roadmap for India's asset monetization. National monetization pipeline launched in New Delhi. And Tokyo Paralympics to begin on Tuesday, 54 athletes to represent India in the sporting spectacle. As the nationwide free COVID-19 vaccination campaign at government facilities for those above 18 years is underway, we advise our young listeners to get vaccinated and help others get vaccinated. We also advise our listeners not to lower their guard as COVID-19 remains a threat to our health. Please stay at home unless it is essential to go out and continue to follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now, the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to German Chancellor Angela Merkel Monday evening and discussed bilateral, multilateral and regional issues, including recent developments in Afghanistan. While discussing the unfolding security situation in Afghanistan and its implications on the region and the world, they emphasized the importance of maintaining peace and security, with the most urgent priority being the repatriation of stranded people. On the bilateral agenda, the 2 leaders discussed issues including cooperation in COVID-19 vaccines, development cooperation with a focus on climate and energy, and fostering trade and economic relations. Mr. Modi and Ms. Merkel exchanged views on issues of multilateral interest, such as the forthcoming COP26 meeting and the Indian initiative to promote a dialogue on maritime security at the United Nations Security Council. They emphasized commonality of perspectives between both the sides on promoting inclusive cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. Mr. Modi and Ms. Merkel reiterated their commitment to strengthen the India-Germany strategic partnership. The government will brief the floor leaders of all the political parties on the situation in Afghanistan on Thursday. In a tweet, the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said Prime Minister Narendra Modi has instructed that the Ministry of External Affairs will brief the floor leaders. Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi said floor leaders of political parties would be briefed by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on the present situation in Afghanistan on the 26th of August at 11 a.m. in Parliament House, Annex A. He said invites are being sent through email and all concerned have been requested to attend. India has so far evacuated nearly 600 people from Kabul in Afghanistan after the Taliban took over. India is carrying out the evacuation missions in coordination with the US and several other friendly countries. India is airlifting its nationals through Dushanbe in Tajikistan and Qatar. The External Affairs Ministry has urged all Indian nationals in Afghanistan requiring assistance to contact its Special Afghanistan Cell immediately. It has set up the Special Afghanistan Cell to coordinate repatriation and other requests from Afghanistan.
China has called upon Pakistan to upgrade its safety measures after a motorcade carrying Chinese workers was attacked this weekend in Gwadar, a coastal town in Balochistan in southwest Pakistan. A suicide bomber attacked a motorcade of the Gwadar East Bay Expressway project heading to the Gwadar port, which is a part of a multi-billion dollars of the so-called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor CPEC project. The attack killed 2 Pakistanis and injured 3, including a Chinese national. Amid signs of growing resentment at Chinese presence and the projects in the country, this suicide attack comes only a month after the 9 Chinese nationals were killed when a bus carrying Chinese engineers and workers to the site of the Dasu Dam was attacked in the restive Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. China sent a special investigative team to Pakistan after the Dasu attack. China's ambassador to Pakistan was also targeted in a terrorist attack on his hotel in April, though he was not hurt. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin on Monday condemned the attack. State media reported that the Chinese embassy in Pakistan asked Pakistan to upgrade its safety measures to ensure such incidents won't happen again. Meanwhile, protests have also erupted in the Gwadar city against a severe shortage of water and electricity and the threats to livelihoods, part of a growing backlash against China's multi-billion-dollar belt and road projects in the country. Protesters accused the Pakistan government of ignoring their basic demands and accused China of undermining their livelihoods and creating local food shortages by illegal fishing. U.S. President Joe Biden said that the airlift of Americans and the tens of thousands of others from Afghanistan's capital is accelerating, but he would not rule out extending it beyond the August 31 deadline. In remarks at the White House on Sunday, President Biden defended his decision to end the war and insisted that getting all Americans out of the country would have been difficult in the best of circumstances. He expressed hope that they would not have to extend their stay in Afghanistan as discussions are ongoing. In a statement, the White House official said 8 U.S. military flights, 7 C-17s and 1 C-130 evacuated about 1,700 passengers from Hamid Karzai International Airport in a 12-hour period. Since August 14, the U.S. has evacuated and facilitated the evacuation of about 30,300 people on military and coalition flights, the official said.
Meanwhile, more Nepali nationals rescued from Afghanistan are in the process of returning to Nepal. Nepal's foreign ministry has informed in a statement that a total of 149 people have returned home, including 39 from Fly Dubai flight last night, 7 from Turkish Air on Monday, and 104 from Qatar Air. So far, a total of 654 Nepali nationals have been rescued from Afghanistan and have reached Kathmandu. The statement added that there is continuous coordination and facilitation to bring the Nepalis rescued from Afghanistan and living in Doha, Dubai, London and New Delhi to Kathmandu. As the arrival and landing of the civil aviation ship in Kabul has not been opened yet, the statement said that cooperation and coordination is being maintained with the allied countries for the rescue of the remaining Nepalis. Nepal's foreign ministry informed that those Nepalese nationals still living in Afghanistan and are yet to be registered for their names can do so on the website of the Consular Services website, www.nepalconsular.gov.np. Elsewhere, the World Health Organization has said that more than 500 tons of medical supplies due to be delivered to Afghanistan this week are stuck because of Kabul airport restrictions. According to media reports, WHO spokesperson Inas Hammam said that while the eyes of the world now are on the people being evacuated and the planes leaving, there is a need to get supplies to help those who are left behind. She said the WHO is also looking at setting up humanitarian air bridge to send in supplies. The executive director of the UN Children's Agency UNICEF, Henrietta Fore, said on Monday around 10 million children across Afghanistan need humanitarian assistance and that conditions are expected to deteriorate further.
Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, in collaboration with BRICS countries, is implementing SARS-CoV-2 NGS BRICS Consortium and multicentric program to study the impact of severe COVID-19 conditions on TB patients. In a statement, the government said that the SARS-CoV-2 NGS BRICS Consortium is an interdisciplinary collaboration to advance COVID-19 health-relevant knowledge and to contribute to improvements in health outcomes. The second multicentric program consists of an interdisciplinary team of researchers from India, Brazil and South Africa who will investigate the impact of severe COVID-19 on transient peripheral immunosuppression and lung hyperinflammation conditions in TB patients for epidemiology and comorbidity. Now the coronavirus updates from around the world. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine on Monday. In a statement, the FDA said that the vaccine has been known as Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine and will now be marketed as Comirnaty for the prevention of the COVID-19 disease in individuals 16 years of age and older. The vaccine has been deployed for the vaccination drive in the country under an Emergency Use Authorization EUA. The statement added that the FDA's approval of this vaccine is a milestone in the battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of a drive encouraging people to get vaccinated, young people in the UK have shared the experiences of suffering long COVID in a powerful new video. The UK government has enlisted the support of young coronavirus COVID-19 patients who have told their stories of battling the virus and suffering long-term debilitating effects as part of the new film encouraging people to get their vaccines. The film comes as people aged 16 to 17 in England are offered a COVID-19 vaccine from Monday. All at-risk people aged 12 to 15 in England have also been invited for a vaccination, and young people are encouraged to take up the offer as soon as possible to build vital protection before returning to school in September. Meanwhile, the UK government has agreed to contract for 35 million more doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to be delivered from the second half of next year. In a statement, the UK government said that it is preparing for a booster program this year to ensure those most vulnerable to COVID-19 are protected. Bangladesh reported 117 deaths and 5,717 new cases of coronavirus in the country on Monday. The death toll on Monday is the lowest since June 30, when 115 people had died due to corona. The total death toll in Bangladesh now stands at 25,399, with 69,466 active cases. The sample positivity rate on Monday stood at 15.54%, marking a slight increase over Sunday's figure of 15.16%. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern on Monday announced the extension of a nationwide lockdown. The island nation is battling a resurgent coronavirus outbreak fueled by the highly contagious Delta variant. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
Azadi Ka Safar every day with All India Radio from Monday the 16th of August. As part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, News Services Division of All India Radio brings to you the story of glorious struggle and sacrifices of freedom fighters on 100.1 FM Gold channel in the English news bulletins at 8:30 a.m., 2 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. You're listening to the World News. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on the grave situation in Afghanistan and its ramifications to the nations and regional peace and stability. In conversation are Dalip Sinha, former ambassador, and Aditi Tandon, journalist.
The rapidly unfolding events in Afghanistan after the takeover of the Taliban are creating a lot of tension and apprehension across the world. There are questions about regional security as well as the international security with respect to the takeover of Kabul by the Taliban. Mr. Sinha, the events are rapidly unfolding. Everything is extremely fluid. We are still watching government formation talks going on. How do you look at this evolving dynamic situation?
Well, it is, as you said, Aditi ji, extremely fluid. The Taliban true to their form, are now starting to show their claws. The earlier agreement which they had signed with the US last year and the agreement that they had that they would not attack US bases and installations fell apart when there was that sudden movement and exit of the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, who left because of internal differences with his own government and the impending Taliban takeover. He fled for his life. This left the Afghan government in turmoil and the civil administration of Kabul collapsed. The Taliban then moved into Kabul city and took over the city. The people of Kabul who were apprehensive of the Taliban took flight and went to the airport. What the Americans had done was to withdraw all their troops to the airport and create a cordon sanitaire there where all their embassy staff and other personnel could be safe from the Taliban. The Taliban then created a further perimeter around the Kabul airport and tried to stop at least the Afghans going into the airport and then fleeing. So those who had been able to reach Kabul airport before the Taliban came in were there. We saw many Afghan people getting killed in the chaos, some while trying to escape. So in this situation, there was utter chaos in Kabul because of the collapse of the civil administration, the flight of the Afghan president, and the complete absence or the melting away of the Afghan army. So it was a situation of each for himself. The Afghan people were trying to protect their interests by fleeing from Afghanistan. The embassy personnel and the Afghans who used to work for these embassies, they tried to get to the airport so that they could flee. And each country then decided that the first thing to do was to protect its own citizens and the Afghans who were working for them. So India was able to pull out its own embassy personnel and some of the Afghans who could come in the aircraft, and other countries did the same. So it was a case of the Hobbesian each for himself and the devil take the hindmost that was in play.
So how do you look at Taliban 2? Because everybody is debating whether this is a new Taliban. Will it actually moderate its old, harsh Islamic interpretation of the law and its very violent image? How do you look at the Taliban?
One thing is certain in this, that the Taliban, the image that they are trying to project to the world, that image has certainly changed, or at least they are trying to change that image. They're trying to project the image of a conciliatory body that can act like a responsible government, which respects human rights, of course, human rights within quotes. But whether they have actually turned a new leaf is impossible for anybody to say. Nobody at the present moment entirely believes that the Taliban have changed. From Western countries to even countries in the region, everybody is following a wait and watch policy. This includes even Russia and China, who have been very close touch with the Taliban all through these last perhaps even years. But even they are following a wait and watch policy because they want to see whether the Taliban actually live up to the image that they are trying to create or trying to show to the world. Now, for India, things are even more difficult than they are for the other regional countries, because we must remember that the Taliban is in close alliance with this organization called the Haqqani Network. The Haqqani Network is run by a person called Sirajuddin Haqqani, and the Haqqani Network is a banned organization under the UN sanctions, and everybody knows that the Haqqani Network works entirely under the control of the ISI of Pakistan. And Sirajuddin Haqqani is one of the deputies in the Taliban hierarchy. So for us, there is the additional problem that the Taliban has elements both within the Taliban and the Haqqani Network who are controlled by Pakistan and therefore are particularly hostile to India. So these raids that you mentioned that have taken place on the Indian consulate and will, I am sure, take this in the Indian embassy also are part of this network. You must remember there was a time when there were repeated attacks on the Indian embassy in Kabul even earlier, because our embassy was always a target and we lost several of our people because of the targeting by the elements of the Taliban, which are entirely controlled by the Pakistani ISI.
External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, while addressing the United Nations Security Council, did flag the heightened activities of the proscribed Haqqani network and also said that Pakistan-based terror networks such as the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed continue to operate with impunity and encouragement, from Pakistan. And he did call upon the UNSC not to adopt a selective approach when condemning terrorism and to keep an eye out for whatever is happening in Afghanistan. I'd also like your comments on this new threat. In fact, the UNSC did discuss this report of the Secretary General with respect to the ISIL and the threats of ISIL, how it is expanding. And there's this new threat now, a self-proclaimed group of ISIL Khorasan, which is expanding its presence in Afghanistan. How do you look at that, considering the Haqqani network in the past has worked with Al-Qaeda and trained terrorists to come and perpetrate violence in Kashmir?
Such reports of the UN have been coming to the Security Council even earlier. There have been reports 6 months earlier, last year also, where the UN said that the Taliban continues to maintain links with the Al-Qaeda and also with ISIL. But such reporting is uncomfortable to the United States because it doesn't fit in the game plan that it has prepared at least since February last year, when it signed that deal with the Taliban, under which agreed to hand over power to the Taliban and withdraw its forces. That has become quite clear. The timeline set in the deal did not entirely get played out. It got delayed a bit. But this is the framework within which the US has withdrawn from Afghanistan. And the US has withdrawn on the understanding that the Taliban will not allow organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIL to come back and recreate a base in Afghanistan. Now, the UN reports discount this assurance. And for India, what is even more difficult is that Taliban have made no commitment that they will not allow other terrorist organizations to come in, especially ones that will disturb regional peace. And for India, organizations like Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, which currently operate from Pakistan, but may move their centers to Afghanistan. And from Pakistan's viewpoint, it will be useful to do that because then Pakistan can claim that it has a clean house and it should be removed from the international financial sanctions that it is facing under the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF.
There are certain experts who maintain that the Taliban of today, might not like to play an absolute proxy to the Pakistan like the Taliban of the 1996. We also know that Mullah Baradar, who's the public face of the Taliban and is at the head of the negotiation table in Doha, was actually arrested by the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence in 2010. So, there are issues on that front also. Do you believe that although Pakistan has leverage over the Taliban, it may not actually have absolute control over the Taliban? Do you believe in that?
Pakistan does not need to have absolute control over the Taliban for it to carry out its nefarious terrorist designs. Even if it has an influential section of the Taliban willing to play ball, that's good enough for it. You're quite right in saying that Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar has not endeared himself to Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan has put him in jail, and it was the Americans who got him out of there and have made him the main face, the international face of the Taliban. But Pakistan will only need to have some sections of the Taliban willing to do its work, and the Haqqani network is quite adequate for this purpose. So for terrorism, you don't require the whole of Afghanistan. Some faces and some factions of the Taliban are enough for Pakistan to carry out its nefarious activities.
The International Monetary Fund suspended US $440 million aid to Afghanistan, saying that there was no government there and that nobody could access the IMF resources without the presence of a formal government. Also, the United States has said, President Joe Biden has said that the US will use economic tools to exercise influence in Afghanistan. Do you see the economic part of the whole game as an important tool to perhaps check Afghanistan, the new Taliban fighters who are taking over Afghanistan? Would that help?
The economic stranglehold can certainly play an important part in this. If the West decides to impose economic sanctions in Afghanistan, it will drive Afghanistan straight into the hands of China, which can easily fund Afghanistan's financial requirements. So this game will start coming into play. The arguments for the West will be that if you don't help the Taliban government, then you lose whatever leverage you have in that country. And that is the kind of argument that the West uses for continuing to provide assistance to Pakistan. So this is high politics that comes into play and a very cynical kind of politics. So right now the IMF has withheld funds. We have to wait and see once Taliban government has been formed and the current chaos that is there in Kabul is, if it is settled, then what policy does the IMF follow? Will it continue to withhold funds or will it then say that we have a government in Afghanistan and we should release funds?
Thank you for your time, Mr. Sinha.
Thank you, Aditi.
India's Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs, Nirmala Sitharaman, launched the National Monetization Pipeline, NMP, Monday evening in New Delhi. NMP comprises a 4-year pipeline of the central government's brownfield infrastructure assets. This sector included roads, ports, airports, railways, warehousing, gas and product pipeline, power generation and transmission, mining, telecom, stadium, hospitality and housing. Besides providing visibility to investors, NMP will also serve as a medium-term roadmap for the asset monetization initiative of the government.
National Monetization Pipeline is talking about brownfield assets where investment has already been made, where there is a completed asset which is either languishing or which is remaining not fully monetized or which is remaining underutilized. So by bringing in the private participation into this, you're going to be able to monetize it better, and with whatever resource that you're having obtained through the monetization, you're able to put in further investment into infrastructure building.
Moving on to sports, Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games are all set to begin on Tuesday with the opening ceremony set to kick off the event in style. The main concept for the opening ceremony is We Have Wings. During the sporting event, 54 Indian athletes will compete in 9 sporting disciplines, including archery, athletics, track and field, badminton, swimming, weightlifting, among others. This is the biggest ever contingent India has sent to any Paralympic Olympics. All 54 athletes are part of the Target Olympic Podium Scheme TOPS, India's 3-member water sports delegation comprising 2 male swimmers and a female canoe sprint athlete, are confident they will be able to deliver their best performances at the Paralympic Games in Tokyo. For Suyash Jadhav, it is his second Paralympic Games, while Niranjan Mukundan and Prachi Yadav will enter the biggest sporting stage for the first time in Tokyo. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Indian athletes for bringing home 2 silver medals and a bronze medal at the World Athletics Under-20 Nairobi 2021. In a tweet, Mr. Modi said, "Athletics is gaining popularity across India and this is a great sign for the times to come." He also congratulated the Indian men's and women's wrestling contingent, who won a total of 11 medals, including 4 silvers, at the Junior World Wrestling Championships 2021.
And now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian writes rush at Kabul airport kills 7. Afghan fighters seize areas from Taliban. Globe and Mail reports WHO heads calls for 2-month COVID-19 vaccine booster moratorium. Financial Times says global economic data disappointments add to rising growth angst. Wall Street Journal writes China's anti-graft watchdog probes party leaders in Alibaba and backyard. Sputnik News reports Quad white paper calls for including attacks on China's sea cables as part of Malabar naval drills. The Sydney Morning Herald says Afghanistan seen as weak link for the China's Belt and Road Initiative. Khaleej Times writes New Zealand lauds UAE's cooperation in evacuating its citizens from Afghanistan.
Now a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, discuss bilateral, multilateral and regional issues including Afghanistan. Nearly 600 people evacuated from Kabul so far. Government to brief floor leaders of all political parties on situation in Afghanistan on Thursday. China calls upon Pakistan to upgrade its safety measures after suicide bomber attacks motorcade in Gwadar. U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA fully approves Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. BRICS scientists team up to set up network of genomic surveillance and study the overlap of SARS-CoV-2 with tuberculosis. Medium-term roadmap for India's asset monetization, national monetization pipeline launched in New Delhi and in Tokyo Paralympics to begin on Tuesday. 54 athletes to represent India in the sporting spectacle. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Kazakhstan. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.